In this video, we're going to take a look at a startling and all but forgotten piece of interior Salish Indian lore, which I came across this summer while researching what is arguably the greatest mystery of south-central British Columbia. But first, I'd like to let you know that, due to repeated requests, I finally decided to sell a batch of signed copies of some of my books. More accurately, I've convinced my friend Jordan, from Sunlit Cavern Rare Books, to sell signed copies of my books for me on his online store. Every book that Jordan sells, mine included, is shipped for free, and so, all things considered, you'll actually pay less for a signed copy of one of my books on Jordan's store than you would for an unsigned copy of that same book on Amazon. This is the first time I've done something like this, and I think it may be my last, so if you'd like to acquire a signed copy of one of my books, either for yourself or as a Christmas present for someone else, you may want to get it while it's still available. To see the signed books that we have for sale, please click the link in the description. In early April 2020, I published a video on a strange experience brought to my attention by my friend Mateo, who runs the YouTube channel Modern Explorer. This experience took place in late October 2015, on the slopes of Pikes Peak, Colorado. While accompanying Mateo on a nighttime hike along the mountain slopes, Mateo's friend Austin caught a glimpse of a strange gray figure watching him from the side of the trail. This figure was vaguely man-like in appearance, and gaunt to the point of infirmity. It had dark eyes and seemed to be covered with hair. The figure's most startling attributes, however, were its two deer-like antlers, which seemed to sprout from the temporal bones of its skull. Austin only saw the creature for a few moments, illuminated as it was by the light of his headlamp, before it strode ahead of him on two legs and disappeared silently into the trees. Austin initially suspected that he'd seen a manifestation of the Wendigo, an evil spirit of Cree and Algonquin folklore, traditionally associated with the North, the cold, and starvation. Mateo himself, in private correspondence with this author, voiced his own suspicion that the creature which his friend encountered might have been a Sasquatch wearing the skin and antlers of a buck. In my video on the encounter, I briefly mentioned that the antlered figure which Austin described bears some resemblance to certain interpretations of the Ijirait, the mysterious, shape-shifting caribou people of Inuit oral tradition. Said to abide in mountains and caves, these mythological beings can assume the form of any animal, but most often choose to transform themselves into caribou, or people with the heads of caribou. No matter which form they assume, their eyes are always peculiar looking and often red. In his 1875 book, Tales and Traditions of the Eskimo, Danish geologist Dr. Heinrich Rink described a number of old Greenlandic Inuit folktales, vaguely suggestive of the Ijirait legend. In one of the stories, a man transformed his enemies into caribou by feeding them a potion in which he had sprinkled hairs of a caribou skin stocking he had exhumed from the grave of one of his relatives. In another story, an Arctic dwarf entertained his fellow countrymen during a feast by temporarily turning himself into a caribou. A third story tells of an Engakuk, or Inuit shaman, who transformed himself into a caribou out of shame after failing to outperform a rival Engakuk from another band. A few months ago, to my great surprise, I came across another obscure Indigenous Canadian legend strikingly reminiscent of the Ijirait tradition, and of the figure which Austin saw on the slopes of Pikes Peak. I came across this legend totally by chance while reading through an ethnological treatise on the Okanagan Indians, in preparation for a major project on what is arguably the most famous legendary monster of British Columbia's southern interior. The treatise in question is the account of the Similkameen Indians of British Columbia, first published in the 1892 issue of the Journal of the Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. This piece was written by Susan Allison, an Okanagan pioneer who spent time among the Okanagan Indians in the late 1800s, during which she learned many of their traditional stories and legends. After detailing the legend of the Sonnie-appoo, literally the devil, a hairy supernatural giant suggestive of the Sasquatch, Allison writes, quote, "I have heard the Indians describe some Sonnie-appoos as having the body of a man, the head of a deer, with a human face covered with deer's hair. The limbs were also those of a deer. From the shoulders sprung the wings of a bat, which seemed to vibrate in the air perpetually." Unquote. The monster described in this short passage could perhaps be dismissed as an intriguing yet baseless facet of interior Salish lore, and its resemblance to both the Ijirait legend and the subject of Austin's encounter written off as an interesting coincidence, were it not for a rash of relatively proximate sightings of a remarkably similar creature. Throughout 2019, an anonymous cryptozoologist from central Alberta documented a string of alleged Deerman encounters on his blog, albertadeerman.com.blog, all of which are supposed to have taken place in rural communities across the Canadian prairies throughout 2018. The first of these encounters occurred in the hamlet of Mirror, located about 52 kilometers or 32 miles northeast of the city of Red Deer. One Sunday morning in the spring of 2018, the story goes, an unnamed husband and wife, both of whom worked for the county of Lacombe, headed out for a leisurely drive on Alberta's Range Road 225. The husband, who was driving, maintained a relatively slow speed on account of the heavy mantle of fog which blanketed the prairies that morning, obscuring his vision. This decision served him well, giving him time to slam on the brakes when an unusually large deer emerged from the haze, standing in the middle of the road, and gazing vacantly at the approaching vehicle as members of its species are wont to do. While the couple idled, waiting for the deer to cross the road, the animal sedately reared up on its hind legs, towering over the vehicle. Startled by this unnatural behavior, the husband instinctively laid on the horn, prompting the deer to run across the road on two legs and vanish into the mist. The mysterious cryptozoologist goes on to describe 4 more Deerman encounters on his blog, all of which took place in central Alberta in 2018. The writer neglects to disclose the identities of the alleged witnesses, claiming that all of them requested that their names be withheld for fear of ridicule. Although these unverifiable stories from central Alberta cannot be taken as evidence of some humanoid cervid abomination, they do add a layer of complexity to the growing body of folklore surrounding an entity perhaps best denominated the Deerman. Do you think the Deerman deserves a place in cryptozoological taxonomy? Is the Deerman a new cryptid? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.